Coming up next, a song that came from this legendary rock frontman's desire, in his words, to spit in the face of the put a flower in your hair hippie persona of the 60s. He called it crap, and he and his band wanted to muck up the mainstream. And this song did a perfect job of that. The goal of this rock masterpiece, at least for the band, was to create a song that would scare the living hell out of people. And they pulled that off in spades. With a classic vocal that was sung through a household item, a metal fan, we get the straight scoop behind the scariest song in 1971, one that still haunts us. Great story coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you grew up watching American Bandstand, The Midnight Special, Night Tracks, Friday Night Videos, MTV, 120 Minutes, Headbangers Ball, any of those, you're going to like this channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now and check the notification box so that you don't miss out on any of our upcoming interviews or videos. Be sure to check us out on Patreon for even more content. And also our latest merch too. All of this is about celebrating the best of rock and roll. So our feature today begins with a chilling beat announcing the arrival of a menacing seer. A powerful dark force that must be reckoned with. Who is this creature of doom? Iron Man. It was the first sci-fi monster of heavy metal, a track that forever changed the face of rock music. The four original pioneers of Black Sabbath, they created Iron Man during a recording session for the second studio album, Paranoid. That dropped in 1970. Now, the origin of Black Sabbath is quite a story. Ozzy Osbourne said that the end of the 60s, it was all, if you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear a flower in your hair. Ozzy thought that sentiment was a load of old, happy, hippie crap. He talked about how here they were, living 99 million miles away in Aston, Birmingham, industrial city, and the members of Black Sabbath, the world wasn't happy for them. Black Sabbath used to rehearse across the road from a movie theater, and the guitarist Tony Iommi said, "Isn't it weird how people like to go to the movies and get scared? Why don't we start making music that scares people?" And he came up with the heaviest riffs of all time, according to Ozzy, according to a lot of people. Indeed, Sabbath wrote about their grim surroundings and was an appropriate soundtrack for the times of the Vietnam War and The Exorcist, as many have pointed out. They scared the hell out of parents, and they blew the minds of those coming of age in some unpleasant times. They influenced everyone from Slayer to Metallica to Nirvana. They were first called Polka Tulk when they changed to the name Earth, and then they settled on Black Sabbath, named after their song. That first album was fierce. The second album played on top of that. It was like a powerful sword of hard-driving metal with War Pigs and the title track Paranoid, of course, Iron Man.
Generals gathered in their masses. I cannot feel like love to me is so unreal.
Iron Man germinated organically in a rehearsal room from Bill Ward's bass drum that invited lead guitarist Tony Iommi to join in with an otherworldly sounding guitar riff that really seemed to come from another dimension. The longer Ward's beat thundered on, the more Iommi bent the guitar strings, and the duo's experimental jamming unwittingly produced a wash of the macabre that captured the imagination of lead vocalist Ozzy Osbourne and fascinated the science fiction mind of bassist Geezer Butler. When lead vocalist Ozzy Osbourne first heard what Iommi and Ward were playing, he thought it sounded like a bloke made of iron. Ozzy's first impression led to the band naming the song Iron Bloke as a placeholder. And then a short time later, while strolling down a street in London, Geezer reflected on Ozzy's words about a bloke made of iron. What if there was a bloke made out of metal just walking about? The idea of such a character, it haunted Geezer, and he began to channel his fascination with science fiction and the occult to conceptualize the dramatic transformation of Iron Man. Tony Iommi would say that Iron Man's riffs were basically done without vocals because Ozzy would follow the riff. One of the reasons riffs developed was to keep the audience quiet. According to Tony, he said, if everybody was talking during a gig, we cranked it up to get their attention. The way Ozzy sang the melody over the riff would have an effect on so many people after. I remember interviewing Sammy Hagar, and he talked about it when he was working with Eddie Van Halen on their 1988 top 5 hit, When It's Love.
This was the first time I ever sang a line that Eddie was playing. Da, 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 da. Yeah. And I just sang right to the piano. I said, I don't like doing that, And he's going, no, it's cool, man, it's cool. Yeah. Normally you don't sing, like the epitome of that is Iron Man. I am Iron Man. Musicians always think of that as being kind of like a dumb stuff, that's stupid. Don't do that. Don't sing with me. I'm playing that. You play your own thing.
Yeah.
But Iron Man was the epitome of making it heavy, right? No, this is cool this way.
So Geezer came up with some riveting fiction about a man who travels to the future and witnesses the end of the world. On his way back to Earth, he prepares to warn the human race about an apocalypse. But during his return, he is whipped through a magnetic storm that turns his body into iron. It's like the stuff of science fiction comic books. Really cool. He was turned to steel in the great magnetic field. When he traveled time for the future of mankind. When he arrives from his time travel, he begins to proselyte about the destruction of mankind, but he's taken for a crackpot and no one believes him. Is he alive or dead? Has he thoughts within his head? We'll just pass him there. Why should we even care? Angry about the derision from the public, Iron Man becomes enraged and he vows to destroy the human race to vindicate what he had foretold. Nobody wants him. He just stares at the world. Planning his vengeance that he will soon unfurl. It's really just great science fiction poetry. I love this song. Now, as we continue to break down this classic metal masterwork, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. To me, the tried and true test for any kind of product is time. I've been wearing Zennis for over 18 months, and I tell you, I'm an evangelist if you can't tell. They're quality frames for a price point that is pretty unbelievable, and the extra features I've added, like blue blocks, have made my constant headaches go away from staring at screens. You can go design your very own pair at Zenni.com. So Geezer loved Hammer horror films of the 60s and any magazine about mysteries and the occult that he could get his hands on. He even claims to have had a few supernatural experiences, when he was a child, and having dreams that would later come true. Those experiences shaped his interest in black magic. When Geezer reached his teens, he became enthralled with science fiction and began writing sci-fi plots that could be applied to issues of the future, such as the escalation of air pollution and the Cold War threat of nuclear war. Iron Man was developed smack dab in the middle of the space race era, you remember.
One giant leap for mankind.
During the mid to late 60s, there were a load of books that were romanticizing space exploration and the fantasy of time travel. Geezer wondered what might happen to a man who suddenly transformed into a metal being, yet he still had a human brain and a conscience to do the right thing. Eventually, he's overwhelmed by the betrayal of his own people, though. When they denounce his prophecies and they treat him like he's a lunatic. His frustration drives him to take extreme and deadly action. Many years after Iron Man became a rock classic, Geezer revealed that the song was inspired by the struggles of Jesus Christ and the way he was mocked by his own people. For a period of time, Christ was a hero, a deliverer for the people's salvation. Then he was seen as a crackpot, becoming an outcast. The biggest difference between Jesus and Geezer's Iron Man, though, is that Iron Man didn't forgive his oppressors. He sought to destroy him. What an amazing tale, a Futurama that Geezer Butler wrote. I love it. As I mentioned before, Geezer's Iron Man, it's such an intense and theatrical composition. I mean, it could have been a literary or motion picture landmark. But instead, Iron Man evolved into a landmark for the emerging genre of heavy metal, influencing the future superstars of hard rock and metal, including bands like Judas Priest, Saxon, Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, and Metallica, as well as artists outside of the genre, like Nirvana and Beck. I mean, Beck actually said that Black Sabbath was a bigger influence on him than Bob Dylan. Bill Ward, the man who started the legendary odyssey of Iron Man in the studio, he was disappointed with the hypnotic beats of the original recording. Bill Ward recalled that the band and the studio team, led by 25-year-old producer Roger Bain, they had technical troubles throughout the recording of this track. He contends that the microphones that were available to the band in 1970 weren't capable of capturing the power and depth of sound that they were looking for. I mean, nowadays, it would be very easy for a band to get the proper sound on a dramatic song like Iron Man because sound technology has advanced to such great heights. But on that day, over 50 years ago, Ward pounded his bass drum with every ounce of strength that he had, and he still couldn't achieve the magnitude that he thought that the track really needed. All he could get was a dull thud, a thud he may not have been proud of, but that was forceful enough for Roger Bain and engineer Tom Allen to incite into a virtual masterpiece of metal. Now, beginning with his work on Sabbath's game-changing Paranoid album, Iommi earned the status of guitar god. In his memoir, Ozzy called Iommi one of the greatest heavy rock riff makers of all time. Tony Iommi was so gifted. Most of the riffs were natural, instinctive inventions created in the spur of the moment, and the riff on Iron Man, the former Iron Bloke, was no exception. Now, when Iommi heard Bill Ward's drumming, he envisioned a monster creeping up on you, and that image guided the riff that he'd come up with right then and there. Tony Iommi is Black Sabbath. I mean, he's the only member who has played on each of the band's 19 studio albums, and he composed nearly all the music of Black Sabbath. Although he was sporadically involved with the band after he was replaced by Ronnie James Dio in 1980, I'd venture to say that Ozzy Osbourne is also synonymous with Sabbath for many fans, especially those that go back to their eponymous debut in 1970. Just such a great band. Ozzy calls the title track Black Sabbath the scariest song ever written, and that track was certainly the impetus for his nickname, Prince of Darkness. That moniker was solidified with his hair-raising proclamation in Iron Man. How Ozzy's famous distorted intro was created has been debated so much over the years. Studio technicians assert that Ozzy's voice was recorded and put through a sound processor called a ring modulator, which produces a quivering electronic effect by mixing the input signal with an oscillator. It was the device used to project the voices of the Daleks on Doctor Who. And it was a device that Iommi occasionally used. You can hear it on this guitar solo of Paranoid, for example. It makes sense that Ozzy's nightmarish "I Am Iron Man" intro was created by a ring modulator. However, the prevailing conjecture is that Ozzy delivered the line by just singing behind an oscillating metal fan. Sounds like that. Regardless of how it was done, either by resourceful improvisation or electronic wizardry, it was a stroke of genius. Now, despite the title, the song Iron Man has no connection to the Marvel Comics character of the same name. In fact, some executives at Marvel tried to nix the song from being used in any context within the film series. Starring Robert Downey Jr., of course. How do you not include it, though? I mean, rabid fans of the studio and the comic book brand will recall how the audience went nuts when the song was used for the trailer for the movie at Comic-Con in 2007. The room was deafening with wild cheers when the song dropped and the movie footage was unveiled. There's a passage from a book I just got, The Story of Marvel Studios, The Making of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It shows how Kevin Feige and his creative team somehow convinced the decision makers to approve the song, much to the public's delight. Black Sabbath's iconic recording was placed at the end credits of the Iron Man movie when it hit theaters in 2008. Iron Man is also synced with the film's video game adaptation and the trailer for the 2010 sequel, Iron Man 2. Another really cool pop culture touch was when Tony Stark, Iron Man's alter ego, was wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt in The Avengers, the 2012 film. The live rendition of Iron Man on the Black Sabbath reunion album, it won the Grammy Award for Best Metal Performance in 2010. So my dad had a couple of Sabbath albums. Tried to keep it quiet from my mom. And I remember the first time I heard Iron Man. It scared the living hell out of me. When I first heard those first words by Ozzy, I had nightmares for days after. How is it when you're a little kid that what makes you scared makes you even more curious? Of course, I went back for more. When I started listening to the lyrics, I started making up stories in my head about what the song was about. It's truly one of the great science fiction horror rock songs of the era. And even after all these years, growing up from that little kid who heard my dad's copy to now being an adult, every time I hear that opening, it still induces fear and wonder. Leave us a comment about Iron Man, Black Sabbath, and the great Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer, Butler, Bill Ward. What are your memories of this band and their first and second records? Let us know in the comments below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below to be a part of this, community. Make sure to check us out on Patreon, check out our merch, and get your tickets to our live event series, Professor of Rock Live. You can do that below. All of this is about keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.